Hey everybody, I'm Robert Neal Marshall and welcome to Gate 24. We're all walking through a gate every day in essence, stepping into new chapters, often without knowing even where they're going to lead. And that's exactly the kind of journey that Gate 24 is about. Not just what we do, but why we do it. The spark that keeps us going when life gets hard. So let's get on board together. This is Gate 24, Life Now Boarding. Unscripted Journeys. So, welcome, Heather Tesch. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast today. You have given me an amazing gift by inviting me on Beyond with Heather Tesch, your podcast, and you have inspired so many people that I'm really honored that you would come on the show today.
Bob, it is my pleasure. You have become a friend as well as somebody as I've interviewed, and I've just enjoyed getting to know you so much. And I am so happy to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, part of this new project for me, Gate 24, Life Now Boarding, Unscripted Journeys, is, as you and I have talked a little bit before, is more about taking chances in life. And when people are struggling with the way the world looks today, to what we see on the news, what we see online, what we see on social media, doesn't always represent what's going on for us personally. And we see people looking like they're tremendously successful, but the struggles of how they got there are not shared. We go to an opening night of a musical, and it's the big premiere, but nobody really gets a sense of the hard work, the struggles that went into that. And I think by sharing a little bit of those stories of, yes, we can be successful and reach those goals, but they're stepping stones, and there's a reality, I think. And you have gone through some career transitions of your own, where you work for the Weather Channel. You're a meteorologist for many years, I know that. And after many years working in that industry, you made a change to doing a podcast of obviously a subject, near-death experiences, that was very special to you. And I know it was more than just an interest, because you inspire people. So maybe if you could share a little bit about that journey for you from one to the other, and what was sort of a motivating factor, and when you came upon some stumbling blocks, how did you navigate those waters?
Well, I think life presents us with lots of stumbling blocks. And I also think we present our own stumbling blocks. I sometimes
Mm.
think that we are the ones that get in our way. And yes, I've always been interested in near-death experiences from the moment I heard about them. When I was a teenager, I was interested in the mind and what the mind can do. And then, I started to find out that our thoughts can create reality.
Mhm.
At least that's the concept. And so I really took some of that to heart. And yet I also battled, oh, who am I? Who am I to do anything? That kind of thing. But the interest was always there in near-death experiences. But there were not podcasts back then.
Right.
And it was a little out there for a lot of people. And so it was a personal interest. I might have mentioned it to a person or two, but otherwise it was just my own little thing that I really appreciated and that I really enjoyed. The other thing I really enjoy is cats. So,
The beautiful,
so my
beautiful
cat
kitty cat.
Bubby, he is often in my podcast.
I love it.
He shows up at the end of the podcast. I do a little chat with the audience, and
Uh-huh.
Bubby is almost always there at the end. So I guess he decided he wanted to grace you with his presence there,
Thank
Bob.
you.
So
He's a spirit animal too, obviously,
yes,
to share
yes.
that. And we'll be
Um,
sure to put your podcast and all those links in the descriptions and so forth, because your show is wonderful, and congratulations. It's been what, a year and a half now, or almost 2
it
years?
it's been a little over 2 years now.
Wow.
So it's been really fun. All the people that I
Hmm.
get to meet, including you, and to hear your stories, it really has been such a treasure to be able to do this. So I love it. But and I've always been interested in it. But as I said, there weren't exactly podcasting jobs or a
Hmm.
place that you could share this interest back then. And there wasn't a lot of information that was out
Right.
on this. And you get a book every couple of years, but that was about it. So I
Exactly.
just sort of
So,
kept that in the background. It was just one of my passions.
hmm.
And I did go to school initially for journalism, did that
Right.
for a couple of years, worked in TV as
Hmm.
broadcast journalist. and then eventually became a meteorologist. And I'll just back up a little bit.
Sure.
And as I was saying, I have always carried this belief that your thoughts can create your reality. It's not like you can go, oh, I'm going to win the lottery, that kind of thing. But I do believe that when you set intentions, it really helps push your life in that direction. And so I've always tried to practice it, but a lot of times my brain did get in the way. But I think a lot of times we don't believe enough in ourselves or in other people. And I remember that when I first met my husband's father, this is before we were married and we were in college, and he said, so what are you going to do when you grow up? And I said, I'm going to be a news reporter on TV. And he said, oh, you're going to write for news reporters on TV. And I said, no, I'm going to be a news reporter on TV. And he said, oh, you're going to write for news reporters on TV, because he couldn't get the concept that somebody from a small town, Buffalo, Minnesota, at the time, maybe 5,000, 10,000 people, could do something like that.
To appear on television almost like a celebrity. That doesn't happen to regular people.
Right. And the truth is, they are regular people. And so I fought a little bit because I did have a lot of his beliefs too. And but I also had this kind of inner knowing, that I could do this. And so ultimately I did get a job as a news reporter, and that led to a couple more. My husband was in the Navy at the time, so we did move around a lot, but I kept finding TV jobs where we went. And then when we were living in Maine, I was working as a news reporter, and I realized my heart wasn't always in news reporting. Well, one was because there's a lot of small town, like you'd sit at a sewage waste disposal meeting for the evening and then do a report on that. And
right.
It wasn't quite as exciting as people think. But also, I found it hard because I'm not a challenger. I'm not gonna. I don't want to make people feel bad, and I just didn't like necessarily some of the things a reporter had to do, which we need those people, but it wasn't really me. But I was really interested in what the meteorologists were doing, and I thought it was just fascinating. And so then I went back to school for meteorology. And you do have to work hard to achieve your dreams, because we were living in Maine, but every Monday I would travel up to New Hampshire, drive there, and I would stay in a little boarding house, go to school. Then Friday I would drive back. And then I knew that I needed to make connections. So I called one of the local TV stations. I said, can I just hang out? So every weekend I would hang out for their Saturday and Sunday shows and just kind of shadow them. And then eventually that led to a job doing those weekend shows. So I was pretty busy.
Yeah.
And then finally I got my meteorology degree, and then I got another job, and then my husband moved from Maine, and we were living in Pennsylvania, but I knew to get a job, you needed to have a job. And so I commuted 7 hours up every weekend, and I would do the Saturday and Sunday show, and then I would drive back the 7 hours afterwards. And I would usually drive back after I'd done the show, so it would be 11:30 by the time I got on the road at night.
You're exhausted, and you've been doing that. Crazy.
Yeah, and I did that. I think it was probably like 6-8 months, something like that.
Right.
But it did lead to another job in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And then that eventually led to Minneapolis. And that was my hometown. It was my husband's hometown.
Right.
And
full circle.
Yeah, full circle. We had both gone to the University of Minnesota. I say hometown, but Buffalo was our hometown. But that was just Minneapolis is what people recognize.
Sure.
And so that was great. I was there for a couple of years. Thought I'd be there forever. And then the Weather Channel called, and I thought, oh, I don't think I'm interested. But I went down, and I just loved the people. They were so kind. They were so wonderful.
Yeah.
And I loved working there. I had a wonderful partner, Marshall Cease, and we did the morning show for, I think, 10 years.
Wow.
And so I loved that very much. But things always change. Life changes.
Right.
And I don't know, I was there probably 13 years, but they got new management, and the new management did not renew a lot of contracts.
Happens all the time
It
in
happens
all
the
sorts of
time.
industries. Yeah.
And so then I was like, oh gosh, what do I want to do? And I took a couple years off. I actually created a coloring book,
That's
and
excellent. Right.
yeah, and it was really fun. It was a completely different thing, you know. And
Right.
during that time, I also soaked up so many near-death experiences.
Right.
But
Right.
I did decide to get back into meteorology, and so I got hired back by the Weather Channel, but this was the Weather Channel Digital.
Got it.
And that
Different
was an
platform.
important
Right.
step for me to be able to
Right.
do this podcast.
Right.
So I did that for 5 years. And I was doing that during COVID. And when COVID hit, we had to start shooting everything from home. So I was at
Right.
my home, my editor was at his home, you know, the
Right.
graphics person was at their home, the person
Right.
that did all the analytics and got it up was at, you know, their home.
Right. Right.
And so I started to think, wow, I could do this on my own. You know, I could
Right.
start a podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought about it, you know, for a couple years. And, you know, I had somebody say, oh, everybody's doing a podcast, don't do a podcast.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, oh, but, and I also had to become brave enough to do it because it was a very different field. You go from
Right.
being a scientist and respected in that realm, and then
Right.
suddenly you're doing what some people think is kind of out there, and
Right.
you're talking about God and heaven and
Mm-hmm.
all these things that people have
Spirituality and
experienced.
religion, and yes,
Yeah, and
exactly.
yeah, and so, but my husband said to me one day, you know, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sunk in. And so I just decided to do it. And I think it was May of 2023. So my last day at the digital
Wow.
was like, I don't know, May 7th or something. And I had one on the air
Right.
by May 9th.
May
So,
9th. And
and
that
I've
was
been
with Dave.
doing,
Dave Bennett was your first one, right?
yes. Oh, he's,
Dave Bennett, and I
yeah,
was
Dave
number
Bennett.
7 and 8 because I know you were doing them in two parts
Yeah, I
at
did
the
them in two
time. I knew,
parts.
yeah,
Now
and
now I'm doing them in one part.
right, right.
And I think there are advantages to both. I think the trouble with doing two parts is people had a hard time finding the other one.
If
It
they
was
saw
in the
one and they didn't know, right? But
yeah,
but that's the point I wanted to make about that aspect is just learning through these. They're not even mistakes, but learning and being willing to grow and to modify and to make those changes as your circumstances arise.
right.
Whereas a lot of people might get incredibly frustrated or feel down or don't know where to turn when contracts are given up and people are cutting budgets and you change. But then finding that light, that energy to carry on and know that a lot of people go through the same thing. It's not like you are singled out in life to have to struggle. And we feel very alone, I think, quite often in life when these things.
We do. And it really was one of my greatest gifts
Mm,
because I would have never thought that at the time because I really loved my colleagues and what I was doing.
mm-hmm.
But it taught me empathy. I mean, hopefully I
Right,
had empathy before, but it
right.
really made that sink in where
Yeah.
I think I could just really relate to other people that were struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, life can be hard and not knowing what to do and feeling like there's more, but what is more? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what am I going to do? I didn't really want to do local television and I just didn't know. I knew there was something, but I didn't know what it was.
Right,
Now I can see that
right,
that was probably a yearning in my brain that somehow ultimately led to what I'm doing now with this podcast. But
right,
I
right.
just didn't know it back then.
Right. You don't know. That's the problem. And people always feel sometimes, well, other people look like they know, and everything seems to be falling into place in just the right way. But
Right.
we present this front of bravery, or we don't want people to see that we're struggling, or we don't want to appear weak.
Yeah.
And I think that affects a lot of people in a way that sets them back and to say, wow, how did that person do that? Or I'm feeling
Yeah.
like I don't know when I wake up in the day, I've got so much to do, but I don't want to do any of it. And whether it's emotional or it's financial or it's a career or even a mental health issue of depression or whatever it might be, those challenges, how do people find that one little nugget to take one step at a time? And that's what I shared with you is after having a heart attack and being clinically gone for a minute and a half, and you come back from that and you feel a sense of purpose, a responsibility, and you don't even know what that might be. How do you navigate that? And I know I'm not alone by any means. And you've talked to a lot of people with similar experiences.
Right. And you do discover that there's so many hardships out there. And,
Mm,
we all have our own and they affect us, but you listen sometimes to stories of others and it's really heartbreaking. And
mm,
I think the key that is not always easy to see is, but just enjoy the moment you're in
exactly.
and really appreciate life because life does change. And
Yeah.
and then when it changes, the easiest thing to do is to go with the flow. Now,
Right.
usually that's not what we do, and that's not what I often do.
Right.
But if you
Exactly.
can be accepting of it and it just all flows a lot better. But
Right.
sometimes it takes us a bit to figure that out. And I will tell you that in the time of it, I would have never said, "Oh, I'm grateful this happened." But I
Right.
wanted to get there.
Right.
And I remember at one point saying, "Okay, now I've got to where I'm not grateful it happened, but
Hmm.
I'm grateful for what I learned."
Yes,
And
exactly.
now, many, many years later, I'm like, I'm grateful, for
For that.
that. And I'm
The
grateful
negative
for,
was a positive in
yes.
essence.
And if you look back on life, it is oftentimes the struggles and the hardships that have brought you the most growth.
Hmm. Yes.
And I've seen that throughout my life.
Hmm.
And so I try to remember that when I'm struggling,
Mm.
that life is like this. It
Right.
usually goes up and down. And when you're down, it's usually going to start to swing up.
Right. Right.
And so you just sort of hang on.
Right.
And when
Right.
we don't fight it, I think it's going to go a lot easier. But
Let
again,
it in.
I get it's hard, and so I really
Yeah.
do have that empathy for people that are struggling. And what I hope when with your podcast
Mm.
and with my podcast and
Hmm.
podcasts that are out there that are uplifting is
Right.
that people can hear stories and they can be uplifted by them,
Yes.
and that can help motivate them and
Right.
help them
Right.
understand, that their life can be better as well. And so I
Mm.
really think that podcasts like yours are very important.
Well, thank you. I want to go back to earlier when you talk about struggles or how those changes happen when your your father, your future father-in-law, who was it that said to you about, oh, you want to write? Was that your father or your father-in-law?
No, that was my father-in-law.
Your father-in-law. So when he
My
said that, go ahead, sorry.
and he did not mean that in a mean way at all.
Oh, no,
It
no.
it was just beyond his concept. And honestly, probably a year or two before that, it had been beyond my concept. But
Right.
I remember there was somebody in my college dorm that, was going to be in she said she's going to be a news reporter on TV. And I'm like, wow,
Mm.
that's so brave and so confident to say that that's
Mm-hmm.
what you're going to do. And then I ended up getting an internship at a radio station. And
Mm.
initially I was going to journalism school, but more for the marketing. And that's
Right.
when I
The
really
behind the
fell
scenes.
in love with the broadcasting part of it
Right.
and made that decision.
So how did that happen when you made that transition? That was sort of one of the pinpoints I was curious about is after you get, it's not really negative, but people challenging like why do you think you can do that or whatever that is that might even spark self-doubts in all of us. Somebody says, "Well, what makes you think you could do that?" Or I've got this great idea, and other people had great ideas that become movies, they become major things, and other people have ideas they never take them anywhere and that's not their journey. But what you said, so you had this internship. What was it that gave you, do you think, looking back, the strength, the power, the impetus to then make that move to actually make it happen and realize you could do this? Or what steps did you then have to take? Because you don't just walk into a station and say, "I'd like to work
Right.
for you," unless that is how it actually happens. Sometimes people are overnight sensations and people just see a spark and you're off and running.
Well, as I said, I think our struggles in life push us, and I was
Hmm.
very driven. I think that, sometimes when we have challenges in life, we almost need to prove like we're worthy. And
Mm.
so I think early on, that was not consciously my reason, but it was
Right.
probably subconsciously one of the reasons that I felt this need, this drive to do something that I felt was important.
Right.
And I worked really hard, for example, when I was in college and they had internships at the television station, and there were probably 43 other interns, and they
Mm.
sat there all day and answered the phone. And I'm like, well, how can I stand out? And so I decided I'm going to work the overnight. And I was the only one. And I got there at like, I don't know, at 10 o'clock at night. And I
Right.
would work overnight with the overnight
Right.
reporter. And, then I don't know what time I went home, 7, 8. And that was hard to do, but I did it. And I remember when I was there, I had this, as I said, your thoughts create your reality. I kept saying, before I'm done, I'm going to be on the air here. Before I'm done. And then I was able to do this little pet segment before I went. And that was my goal. And I remember it was my first time on live TV, and my heart was just pounding out of my chest. I was never comfortable in front of the camera for years and years and years. I still get a little nervous before I do each podcast. And and again, when I went back to school for meteorology, um, as I said, unpaid, I went and I just shadowed, and that led to them getting to know me, and then that led to that job. And so I remember telling some of my classmates, because I was older then, I was 27 when I went back to school for meteorology. So I was older than most of my classmates. And I kept telling them, just do what I did. Go, I'll recommend you, come and just shadow. And they're like, well, I don't get paid. And I'm like, well, no, but you'll get the experience. And none of them took me up on it. And I think that's what sets people apart is you have to be willing to do things that go above and beyond what other people are willing to do.
Well, you were talking about opportunities that people didn't necessarily know the value in right away, or they didn't acknowledge that. And I was a student at NYU. I had gone first to acting school to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and then I met a gentleman who said to me, "What is it you really want to do in life?" And I talked about making film and being part of that industry. And he said, "Well, then why don't you find out about going to NYU?" And I did. And long story, I got into the school. And what surprised me is that I was in a sound editing class one day, and this fellow came in to the class and said, "We need someone to put away trims on a feature film." And putting away trims, it's not like today with digital editing. There were literally pieces of film that had little sprocket holes on it, and they would have a time code, and you'd have to go through this tedious process of finding where these pieces of film went and taping them back together. It's like taking hundreds of library cards and putting them back, or dealing with dozens and dozens and dozens of digital files and having to sort them. And a class of 26 plus aspiring filmmakers, only three of us raised our hands when someone came in and said, "We need someone to do this job." And during the interview with this producer and director named Jeannie Joseph, who ended up hiring me, and I've worked with her several times over the years, I said, "How come only three of us put up our hands? I heard 35 millimeter feature film is, what an opportunity." And she said, "Those are the only three that would have a shot at making it in this industry potentially, because again, you have to be willing to sweep the floors. You have to be willing to do almost anything." And I just thought this is a great opportunity to learn.
But if you don't want to do that, that's okay. We all make our choices in life, and they will bring us where they bring us. And for me, that's what I wanted to do. And
Exactly. Certain.
well, and it's the same with this podcast. I put in so many hours, and it's hard to get any kind of a payback doing a
Mm-hmm.
podcast. But I love the work, and to me, a lot of the payback is meeting people like you and making these connections and being part of this community. And there's so much growth, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people may not be willing to put in, because there's oftentimes when I'm putting in
Right.
40 hours a week, doing this. And so, and not everybody has that opportunity to do that. In this point in my life, I can do that. But so it's a choice.
And it's interesting because being in casting as well as being an actor, I've seen both sides of the table, and people sometimes aren't right for a job because somebody else is just different. It's not anything that anyone could have done anything about. It's not because someone's bad at something. It's just the way it works out.
Yeah, it's hard work. And I mean, I can't even imagine going into acting because I mean, that is so hard. And you have to, deal with a lot of rejection. There are a lot of people going for the same parts. I mean, that takes a lot of guts and a lot of fortitude and bravery because you have to keep putting yourself out there over and over again. It's very impressive.
And that's a challenge for lots of people, and to try to figure out why am I here and what am I supposed to do with all of this? And life itself takes you in all sorts of directions that sometimes just dealing with living each day and cherishing that day and bringing empathy and caring about people and making an effort to listen and to touch people is what it's about. That particular Friday was like any other Friday for me. I had no idea when I had my heart attack that Friday afternoon that I may not be here the next day. It was a normal day. There was no great warning. And just think about 9/11. The people who, the night before, there was a post that I read where someone said, people were going to bed, having dinner, just doing normal everyday things. And there were thousands of people who would not be here the next day. You can't plan for that. And it may sound morbid to some, but it's not. It's the fact that cherish life while we're here. Give back. Do everything you can to make a difference through what you share with others and how you can inspire.
Yes, we never know the end, and it is so important to appreciate each day. And I will say too that I've talked to so many people on my podcast that have had life reviews, and I've never heard anybody come back and say, "Oh man, I saw myself being successful, and I really felt great about that." I mean, it just wasn't important. What was important is how they made other people feel. And you can do that with whatever your platform is. Some people do get a platform, they can be an actor, or they can have something where they touch a lot of people. Other people, and really for all of us, it's those simple everyday interactions that we have that we can make a difference in this world. And you just hope it keeps rippling out and things get better and better and better in this world. We hope.
Heather, thank you so much again for everything you do. Your podcast, everyone, if you have not seen it yet, Beyond with Heather Tesch, it's on YouTube, not to be missed. It is uplifting, it is inspiring, and Heather, thank you for sharing that and the inspiration that you are giving to other people through your own work. I'd love to have you back on the show again and to talk about this. And folks, do check it out on YouTube. Again, it's Beyond with Heather Tesch. And Heather, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you for all that you've done.
I've loved getting to know you, and it's just such a pleasure to be able to be on your podcast. It's exciting. I'm very happy for you.
So thank you for joining me here at Gate 24. I hope today's conversation lifted you up and gave you a little perspective, or maybe just reminded you that we're all traveling on this unpredictable road together. And well, for me, I hope this is just the beginning. I've got many more guests, more stories, and more journeys to share with you in the weeks ahead. So if you'd like to keep boarding with us, keep on this journey, the best way is simple. Please subscribe. Hit that follow button or leave a kind review. I know everybody says it, but it really does help listeners find their way here and to help others. And if you're feeling extra generous or just want to claim some bragging rights, maybe as one of our early producers, one of our producers of this adventure, you'll find a little Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. No obligation, of course, if you don't drink coffee, but every little bit of support will help keep these stories soaring and flying. So again, thank you for listening, for sharing, and for being part of this journey. Until next time, I'm Robert Neal Marshall, and this is Gate 24, Life Now Boarding, Unscripted Journeys.